I'm seeing that 7 o'clock come round, so I think we'll get going because I know that parent time is precious and you've already gone to a lot of trouble to be here tonight. So thank you and welcome to CREW's, the Family for Inclusive Education. The rest of CREW is doing lots of workshops for the end of the year, but this is our last online workshop for the year where we're taking stock and aiming high, wrapping up the year we're in and starting to have a tentative look at next year and what it might look like for our children. So I'm Ainsley Robertson. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit more further down the track. And my wonderful colleague, Lindy Bregman, is by my side at the moment. She's just keeping an eye on chat. She'll pop her head in. Hello. We'll do our social distancing bit. So yes, welcome and thank you for taking the time out to be here tonight. I'd like to start with our acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to acknowledge the First Nations people as the traditional owners on the land on which we are meeting here in South Brisbane and in your regions tonight too, because I know there's people from all around the state and sometimes we get people from interstate and internationally. I recognise the country north and south of the Brisbane River as a home of both the Turrbal and Jagera nations. I pay deep respects to all the elders past, present and future. So here we are, and I'm going to head along into telling you a little bit about CREW for those people who might be new to CREW, and hopefully I'll get my next slide up. Sometimes it just takes a couple of goes to click on. Or even just try the mouse. A little bit grumpy. Oh. I think I've got my little slides mixed up there a little bit there. I'll tell you a little bit about CREW before we head along. So CREW, for those who haven't been to a CREW workshop before, has been around for 30 years. We're a Queensland-based community organisation. And the main focus that I guess we're really looking at tonight with this workshop is for CREW is to inspire and encourage individuals and organisations to pursue better lives for people with disability. So that's very much what's at the core of this workshop this evening. So tonight, it's not going to be too heavy with Lindy and I presenting. We're going to give you a fair bit of time to interact together. So we're just getting through our welcomes and introductions. So we're going to have a fair bit of time tonight for you to have a little chats in breakout rooms. And we do ask, because tonight is really a family and parent focus. So if there are educators or people who don't directly have children with disability themselves, we do ask if you not participate in the breakout rooms, as it's really a chance for parents just to have those personal discussions. Also, please feel welcome to enter any questions or comments that you've got in the chat. Lindy's keeping an eye on those throughout the evening, and so will I when she's presenting, so that we can respond to your chat as we go. And there'll be questions and answer time at the end as well. So what are we looking at tonight? First of all, we're going to be reviewing the importance of inclusive education, having a vision for your child. We think it's always good to come back to that. I know it's something that CREW revisits often, but it's really at the core of the work we do for our children. We'll be reflecting and looking back at 2020. It's been a huge year. I saw a very funny review on TV of it last night. Hopefully yours personally hasn't been as hectic as many others, but yeah, no doubt many have been. We'll be revisiting inclusive education. That's always good to come back and just do a little revisit of what is it that we're aiming towards for our children in the way of inclusive education. We'll be having a look again at those key tips for conversations and ideas around how to do those transitions as smoothly as possible. And we'll be talking about keeping on track, keeping the kids on track and that vision on track in 2021, and helping you prepare and get excited for the year ahead. Okay, so it's not quite breakout room yet. I might rest on that one. So I was going to tell you a little bit more about myself and Lindy before we go ahead as a little example for you for the breakout room. So my name's Ainsley. I've only been with CREW since I came in early COVID in about April, May. And I'm a consultant here with the Families for Inclusive Education team, and as is my workmate, Lindy Bregman. We're a small team of 4 people that sort of keep this show going. We do online workshops, obviously, consultations one-on-one, and we do face-to-face workshops, which we're starting up and planning for next year as well. So I have 2 children with disability. I have my daughter who's 15, who's in year 10 at high school. We're now looking at the senior years for her. She has learning and attention issues. And my son, Will, is autistic and has complex communication needs, and he is in year 6. So we're getting ready for the big transition to high school. Lindy, if she wants to pop on over and say a little hello and introduce herself.
Hello. Yes, I'm Lindy. I've been working on this project since it started, which was only about 15 months ago. And but I've got 4 children, and Millie, who's in year 10, is really the reason why I'm so very passionate about inclusive education and making sure families are informed and connected.
And Lindy and I are both from the wonderful eastern suburbs of Brisbane. So we'd like to let people know in our little chat room sort of what region we're from as well. All right. So without much further ado, Lindy, I think we're ready to head out into our first breakout room. So please feel free in this next breakout room to introduce. Okay, now that we're all back and running, I thought we'd start with why inclusive education. So the best example is the story of my sons here. So my dear young man, Will, who's 12, he started off school in a general mainstream setting. His first couple of years of general mainstream school did not go well at all. And we found ourselves in a very precarious position and not really knowing inclusive education well at all. We were kind of steered towards the special education system. And we felt at that time, because he had a very distressed young man, that that probably was the best way forward for him. Unfortunately, though, those 2 years inclusive education just saw him go in, special education just saw him go further downhill. So we then sought back, trying to find a way back into regular schooling. When we headed to regular schooling, Will was directed into a support program and was not really fully included with the regular mainstream school. We saw little improvements for him, but he was still a very anxious boy, and he was still not really making any firm friends or finding a clear way ahead. Thankfully, in the last few years, and particularly this year, we've finally got inclusive education happening for our boy. And wow, we have seen a whole other side to him. He's really come into his own. He started to make a great group of friends, be interested again in learning. We've seen so much of their anxiety and the meltdowns just drift away. And we're really starting to see a way forward for our son where he will be part of our local community and get that high education that he obviously has been really desiring himself. It's sometimes I feel as though he's looking at me like, Mum, you've finally got what I wanted. And I feel sad that it's taken us this long, but he has had a great year and now we're setting up ready to head off to high school. So I guess in summary, that's why inclusive education is so important for our kids. And that quote down the bottom really resonates with me. I want him to be positively and genuinely connected to his mainstream community for the rest of his life, and that starts with school. And I've seen that become very acutely aware of, the need for the inclusive education to make that happen for him. So you can see some photos of him there with his best friend. There's one there of Will at the cross country and 2 friends helping him across the finish line. I haven't put everyone's faces in because I didn't get around to getting everyone's permission, but I got one close friend's permission to get the photo in there. There he is out at play, being really active and learning in the classroom and being part of all those extracurricular things like the Japanese days and excursions. So yeah, it's been a real joy to see him really blossom this year. So we're going to just ask you to press pause for a moment in your minds and have a little reflection on what 2020 has been like for you and your family. So we're going to ask you to think of one positive from this year. And I know for some that might be easy and others that might be really tricky. So even if it's just a small positive that you can find, and then thinking about how that positive might be built upon in 2021. And then also to think about something that didn't work so well, that held your child back in some way. What learning can be taken from this to improve school life for 2021? I know we've still got a little bit of work to do with Will with curriculum inclusion. It's still not as perfect as I would like. So that's one area that I know I'm going to be working towards for him next year. And a positive would be those social connections and building on those. So just take a moment now to have a little think, because we're going to head out to a breakout room soon and let you have a further talk with people in the breakout room. So it's just reminding people that it's not just physical inclusion, it's not just a feeling of being welcomed, but it's also the social inclusion that schools are working towards, making sure the children are making friendships and being part of everything within the classroom, and also that curriculum inclusion. It's really important that our kids are being presented with the same content, that age level curriculum as their peers, and the teachers are working out how best to make that happen, because conversations between the children at playtime and outside of school will be on what they've been learning at school. And we want our kids to make sure that they can be part of that as well, and to be getting that highest level of education. So we're getting ready to focus on 2021. So now that we've talked about the physical, social and curricular inclusion, I want you to think about what will be the highest priority for you. Now, for some people who are just entering into inclusive education, it can be a real battle just to get their child into the regular school. So for some people, it'll just be about that physical inclusion for next year. Other people are probably thinking, oh, we still aren't making those good friendships. So we're going to really focus on that, building that social inclusion. And for some, it will be, we still haven't perfected this curriculum inclusion. We need to start getting that going. So we're all going to be at different stages and places. So again, I'm just going to ask you to pause for a minute and jot down your thoughts about what area would be, especially for the beginning of the year, your focus at physical, social or curricular inclusion.
Shall we launch the poll?
And yeah, we actually have a poll that will help you along the way with that. So I'm going to pop up a poll, and when ready, if you can pop in your yes or no as to which one's going to be your area of focus. And then we'll just have a look at the results, so people can just see sort of the differences in the group tonight.
It's all anonymous.
It's all anonymous.
Here we go.
There, now we can see. So it's all fairly equal. The poll results there between the physical, social and curricular, perhaps some more there working towards the social inclusion more than anything. Yeah, but still quite a few people working towards that physical inclusion and the curricular inclusion as well. So yeah, we'll have some information about that social inclusion as we go as well. That may help you out as well.
So our first tip is to be confident and clear about what you want, but don't overwhelm with demands. And that's always a bit of a balance. So be strong in your stance that your child will bring so much to their class and their school, that it is their right to be there, that the evidence is on the side of inclusive education. If you haven't been to any of our workshops before, this might be all very new, but we do actually have some really great online learning modules now on our website, little recordings of things about the research, the evidence and that sort of thing. So it's really important to remember that the conversations that you have to begin with, particularly with new teachers, are really going to either move you closer to or further away an understanding of your child. So be very careful about the language you use. Be careful about seeming apologetic. So, you know, your role is to be their parent, and it's okay to actually be extremely proud of your child, because that's what you should be doing. And no one else, that's no one else's job. So that's really important to remember. If problems are raised and concerns are raised, do model a solution focus. That doesn't mean that you need to know the answers to every single problem right on the spot. But it is important to remember that you've been including your child right from the first day. And you probably have learned a lot of skills and things along the way of how to include them in your family life, at home, out and about, at various functions and things, environments and in situations which they may not be easily included in, but you've probably figured out ways of doing that. So do value the information that you bring and be willing to share that. If you don't know, then just simply, you can actually say, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't thought about that before, but would really like to work with you to solve that, and do just keep coming back to the positives of your child being in the class and how much your child is actually looking forward to things, the way that you would talk about any child entering into a new school year. So don't talk deficits. Please don't talk. I have a background as an OT, so I feel like I can actually say, don't turn up with big, long reports. I think the most important thing is to actually, for you to sort of take out the pieces of information that you know are the most important things for any teacher on the first day to know about your child. And look, I'm going to give you an example of what we've done with Millie to communicate to her high school teachers, just to sort of illustrate that. But yeah, it's really important. While adjustments are important and supports are important to mention and communicate, you don't want to be overwhelming people with lists and reports. It just sort of sets up the conversation and the tone in the way that you don't want it to go. Remember, it's the start of building a relationship. Think about other relationships in your life where you want to nurture and approach it the same way. You wouldn't approach this relationship any differently than you would with any other relationship in life. Remember that this is the person that's likely to have the most influence in your child's day, particularly in the primary school years, or if it's in high school, you'll probably be having conversations with somebody like the head of learning support or the case manager, the key person. So even if perhaps their attitude is not like you would like it to be, try and actually model enthusiasm and positivity rather than really getting weighted down with perhaps a bit of negative, don't go sarcastic or criticizing. So think of other ways of being able to inspire people. So from year to year, you'll probably be able to, and hopefully you have come across people in your child's year this year or previously who have been an ally to your child's inclusion. And those tend to be the people who just naturally see the potential in your child, who naturally talks about your child's strengths and interests, who just sees your child for the unique individual that they are. They tend to and you will know who those people are in your life and in your child's life. They're particularly if they are teachers, if you've had a teacher this year or a staff member who is like that, I would really capture on paper the key things that they see as being important and instrumental in communicating about your child. If there are other things going on, like, outdoor, like, if your child's in dancing or in, scouts or whatever, if you really are struggling to find anyone other than yourself to talk about how to best include, it's actually really helpful, I've found, to actually have some suggestions are actually written down by others. It also enlists people's idea that this child is absolutely includable, is worthy, is valued, and sort of sets the tone. As your child's parent or family member, you're going to have the best idea of where your child started. I couldn't count the number of times where I've had meetings where the staff members in the room sort of framing things like they're quite concerned about the gap, or the, that she's quite, not, a bit delayed in various areas of academics and things. And I couldn't be prouder. I couldn't be more impressed. She's on track. She's achieving wonderful things. She's the improvements we can see, but to others, there have been many times. And so often I've had to bring it back to, well, actually, where she was 2 or 3 years ago was here. So, this is really great. So yes, while, she is still having challenges in these areas, we can get around those, and this is where she's actually come from. So that's really important. And do be assured that your child will continue to grow and progress, at their own pace. And the more that they're in regular classroom activities and the regular school activities and feeling welcomed and belonging, the more that's just going to happen. Do show that you appreciate outgoing teachers if they've been great. Do actually enlist their help. One of the most important things when Millie, and if any of you are actually transitioning into high school, we did a webinar specifically on that. So you can actually email us and we can send you the recording and slides for the transition from primary school to high school. But one of the most important, valuable things a teacher ever did for Millie was at the end of year 6, she went to a staff meeting at the high school and presented, and I did trust her messages. We'd had a couple of rough years, and it took me a little while, but by July, I think I'd finally was actually trusting her. And by the end of the year, you could just see that she just always spoke about Millie in a really positive way. It was always just about, what do I need to do as a teacher to actually support and adjust so that she can actually access the curriculum and show what she knows. It was never about a burden or, low expectations. She never questioned Millie's place in her year 6 cohort. She was always a valued member. So those sorts of really core messages are gold. And that was really helpful in our transition to high school. If you are facing unhelpful assumptions, do try and actually set the tone with a 1-page profile with a real statement of your vision, and practice the way you speak about your child. And like I said, I will show you an example of what we use in a moment. And know the key people that you need to work with. And every school is different. And the culture will determine who the best people are to speak to, depending on how old your child is and what any issues are, and certainly in the transition process. So in some schools, they really do like going through a certain communication process, maybe even particularly at a high school level, where they really only want you to talk with the case manager or someone in such a role, whereas other schools would be perfectly fine with you actually communicating directly to, the 10 subject teachers for next year or whatever. So it's sort of making judgment calls, remembering that advocacy is above all strategic. And, while it can be a pain and it can be really obstructive sometimes if things aren't just nice and smooth and people aren't receptive to the communication, you sort of really do have to work with the school system and the people that you're working with for the best for your child. So this is a lovely quote from a mother of Sophie. And she says, being prepared for meetings and thinking about what information I can provide about Sophie has been really important. I've mostly found teachers very open to my input, but I do try to be well prepared to keep an eye on what I want from the process for Sophie, and also modelling a positive approach. It took a while for me to break the habit of focusing on Sophie's limits, but while I don't deny the challenges, I do see my role as keeping the broader picture in view. that Sophie is a student with the same need to participate, learn, have friends, and be challenged. And we've included that quote because it really brings home a lot of what we're trying to sort of get across tonight. Every child is unique, and all the adjustments that you need to communicate can be very different. But I think at the core of it, as a parent, it's so important to get across the information to whoever is going to be working with your child next year, that first and foremost, this is your child, that they are a full and total human being with the same needs. And that's a really good place to start. So this is the one-page profile that we have shared this year, and we do try and update this annually for Millie's teachers. The next slide sort of covers sort of more points. So, you know, you can see we try and make it into like a little one pager, so that even if a relief teacher was on that day, they already can see. I usually try and have a lovely photo of all my children or the whole family, really to be able to communicate immediately that Millie is a valued member of our family. You know, I really hate to explicitly say that that is something that needs to be communicated, but we have learnt the hard way that just doesn't sometimes get across. So just to be really out there and go, you know, all conversations from this point on are going to be in a valued way. She is a loved member of our family. The expectations are high. We expect that she will get a wonderful education. We expect the same wonderful future for her as we do for our other children. So we really try and get that across straight away. And we've been very intentional to have a photo like that rather than a photo of her on her own. That's been something that's been important to us as a family. You can see up the top there, we have a vision statement. So if you want to learn more about vision, we have a whole section about vision in our resource site. It's really about explicitly saying about Millie what we would want for our other children, but would never have to write it down. It keeps our conversations on track, particularly as we get through the high school years, and she's in year 10 now. So we get to avoid or focus conversations that might focus on life skills or focus on very low expectations that people might have because of their old ideas to do with disability or to do with her diagnosis or whatever. We then go into Millie's strengths and interests. So really talking about who she is, what makes her, you know, this wonderful person and what she brings. And then really, like, you know, years ago, I used to always have, you know, what challenges does Millie face, or what do the impairments look like, you know, because of my background. But over time, and since meeting Crew, which wasn't until 2015, I've learned it is really important to frame it in a way that right from the start, that it's about adjustments to keep her comfortable, adjustments to help her be confident in accessing the curriculum. So it's all about reducing the barriers, and there's nothing to fix with her. So that's real, very high value type of communication there. So that's a quote from I've done a recording sort of about the story of me sort of coming across Crew. It's a video that's actually on our vision. Yeah. So in our vision section, it's called Leading with Gifts and Strengths. And I have learnt that really I am the only person who's going to advocate for her and her vision. So I would rather people sort of look at me like I'm in denial, which I'm sure many of you would relate to, because I think that's sort of a fear that you can have, that you just don't even realize your child has a disability. I'd rather sort of have people look at me that way, and for me to actually have to get to the point of saying to people, I realize she has a disability and that's okay. You know, she still has the human right. She still has a future. She still has the right to pursue her interests, to get a quality education, et cetera, et cetera. So it helps you bring people along.
I think the quote I got recently was because I was talking Will up as I do, and I got now you do realise that we consider Will to be a complex case. I said, yes, I know he comes into that category, but let's get back on track to how we're going to reduce these barriers for him. Yeah, I think they're just checking in with me to make sure that, so it's definitely still there.
And the work that we're working in now is really, it's about realising that just, a disability, just like gender, just like race, is not a reason to be not looking forward to a good life. And that's what Crew really works in. So I start with the vision. So that's the first thing that I have on our one-page profile. And so examples of that from her statement is she will confidently step out into the world at the end of her school years. She will be surrounded by people who value her presence and contribution. She'll develop a wide social circle. She'll take risks and experience success. So these are things like the whole vision that we have are things that we have reviewed and built on over time, and have often come up from experiences in her life that I was blindsided by. Like, for example, taking risks. I didn't know that was a thing that people would prevent her from actually doing until she sort of has come through school, and people would happily let my other children, take risks and learn from them and make mistakes. That's okay. But you could see people were constantly trying to prevent things and she needs to be able to learn that resilience and learn from mistakes as well, because that's what life's all about. Strengths, gifts and interests are really important then. So talking about things. So she has always had a deep interest in science and technology. She's actually extremely creative. She's a real perfectionist, actually. I say that in her profile because she's absolutely a perfectionist. She will work through something to the end. She's a very determined person. She's a valuable contributor in group work. So all of these things, now, and Millie is a child where I have worked with people in schools in the past who have struggled to see strengths in her, whereas I can see a zillion strengths. So fortunately, we work with people now in school who absolutely, I've had multiple teachers go, oh yeah, I could totally see, brand new teacher said, oh, I could totally see that she just absolutely loves science, could see that in the first week. Another one contacted us because she absolutely could upload all of this stuff in her creative industries subject and was really impressed at how fast she could just learn these apps and create new games and things. So these aren't, made up. These are authentic. They are things that have built over time. Obviously, they were very different when she was little, but it's really important to have that focus, and that's the stuff that you want to get across as your child gets older. Adjustments. So then comes in the adjustments you need to reduce the barriers. So it's not about things that need fixing. It's not about, and we talk about the difference between inclusion and integration in our workshops, and that's also available in our online modules. But it's very much about, okay, so Millie needs visuals, really important. It's amazing what she is able to achieve and follow. And she is in all mainstream classes in year 10, and she's actually just started what they call a soft start to year 11, so everyone can try their year 11 subjects. She is absolutely able to do things as long as there is an expectation that it will happen. And over time, we have learnt what she needs. Again, it would have been very different, but, as a parent, you get to be able to also over time hear from teachers, when there's an issue, solve it and then note it down, because that's really important. Every problem that you solve, every issue that you run into in school is a really valuable piece of information moving forward. And there would be very little on Millie's one-page profile under that adjustment section that hasn't been sort of, just learnt from problems. So do try and meet problems with that solution focus and note and work things through and note them down. Another example is transitioning. Millie had problems with transitioning from class to class for a very long time. And something as simple and ordinary as just simply having another person to go with. The reason didn't really matter, not for us anyway. It's probably because she's afraid of being bumped or it's very loud and chaotic and whatever. At the end of the day, she just really likes to walk with someone, and that works well. And you know, if you've got a conversation with people who are receptive to supporting your child, then you know it shouldn't be an issue. And then the high expectations goals are really important, and that's where you can relate back to things like independence and confidence. Things if you are struggling to maybe reduce adult support, then in your one-page profile you might talk about, we're currently developing, she's working on skills in assistive technology. She needs to be able to access this in every one of her subjects. She needs to be able to communicate with the adult support when she doesn't need help as much as when she does. So these are things that we've had to sort of include because we are pushing against some you know, low expectations and some old assumptions that she will always need help. So I have always liked to sort of put into it as a goal. And then if everyone's sort of on board and the school is actually going, okay, yeah, okay, we can see why that would be important in moving towards an independent, confident person. So, okay, we can be on board with reducing adult support, etc. So moving on now, when you actually you've thought about what, you know, your positives and negatives from this year, you will know now the thing that you actually want to see continue into next year and the thing that you want to work on. If it's a social goal, physical goal, curricular goal, it's always really important to plan. So it's planning who you will speak to, depending obviously on the age of the child, the culture of the school. What are you going to talk about? What's the priority? Use your vision for your child and what, you know, what you see as being, and think about typical and ordinary. So it would hopefully not be a goal of, I want to see better fine motor skills. It needs to be something more like, you know, you might want to see your child be more confident and socially included more. You might want them to be able to contribute more in group work or be more involved in writing tasks. So it could be anything, but really have it, you really want to be focusing on like a typical ordinary goal. So not a therapy goal, if that makes sense. And then you can also think about where would you have this conversation? When's the best time? Are you having a meeting with next year's teachers soon before the end of the year, or is there a time before the start of year next year? And look, we understand that, you know, different schools have different teachers have different things that they're comfortable with, and that's something you need to work with.
And at the moment, we've still got some fairly strict regulations around face-to-face meetings. So that's still an issue as well for many.
Yes. So, you know, and that I think is even where that written communication needs to be just so very simple, easy to uptake, got the right messaging. That can be so important if you don't think you're actually even going to get a face-to-face meeting or a Zoom conversation or whatever. So before your child enters, you know, next year's classroom. So that's something to also really think about. And look, that's a great quote from Burton Blatt. Some stories enhance life, others degrade it. So we must be careful about the stories we tell, about the ways we define ourselves and other people. So, you know, if you want your child to be seen in a certain way, think about how you speak about them and about where they've been. And there's a different way of being able to start conversations. So hopefully that's all made sense. I'll hand back to Ainsley now while I split people in the breakout room.
He's a breakout room expert, so I'm going to leave her to it. So we're about to head in our breakout room and we're going to share some of the changes and goals for 2021. So thinking back about what Lindy just spoke about, those specific areas of the vision that you'd like to really hone in on, and have a little chat about how about you're going to do that. So the who, the what, the where, the when, the how, the why. So off you go, zoom away. So now it's time to get yourself excited. Even though for some of us this year might have been challenging, there's a fresh year ahead of us. So it's about helping your child get ready and develop skills, but no, they don't need to meet any readiness criteria. So we like to highlight at this time of the year, we often see outside OT and therapy places, prep readiness courses, and in sometimes even newsletters and emails from school, tips on how to get your child ready for high school or ready for school in general. So your child is ready no matter what. Yes, there might be things that you think, yeah, we need to do a little bit of planning with our child and do perhaps some little visual stories to help them get their head around how it's all going to work and what's going to happen. But there's no need for you to be spending hours getting your child to hold the pencil properly or to be able to unpack their bag and take off lids and all those sorts of things. So just know that, you know, your child is ready no matter what stage they're at. It's about school bringing those barriers down for them. It's about picking out the key things that are important to you. So don't overwhelm with too many demands, but do try to describe your hopes and dreams in the most important areas. So many of us want to go into school with a whole list of things that we want to happen next year. But yeah, as it says there, that overwhelm. I was just talking in a breakout room with another parent, and how when we actually discussed what we wanted for that next year ahead, it was actually just an ordinary goal that most other students and parents would have for the year ahead. For us, it was around our children transitioning to high school. So our goal is just for them to settle into high school well, to make some initial friends and to get their heads around, you know, what classes they're going to be doing at what time. So fairly common, ordinary goals. But for our kids, often that needs to be highlighted so that people aren't looking at something else that is more like a therapy type of goal. So share your excitement with others. So I'll be talking about how we're excited for high school with my family and friends. And I'm still at that stage very much with my extended family where they're still scratching their heads over how is it possible for Will to be going to the local high school. So it's very much about me sharing that excitement and talking about the ways and means that's going to happen for him, and sharing that with the other families that we connect with through school and outside of school. And I've certainly too that excitement, be sharing that with his teachers as well at his old school and the new school going forward. Okay, so here's some tips for that preparation for 2021. So ask about how your child will be supported so they'll be engaged in the curriculum and supported to belong. So for me, I'll certainly be having a look at what sort of strategies that school will be using to ensure that Will knows which classroom he needs to be in at what time, having a look at how they're getting their head around how Will's going to be part of that lesson and engaged alongside his peers as much as possible. Sometimes it's good and handy to prepare a script to negotiate any barriers or negatives that you may anticipate. So for me, I'm a little bit worried about the fact that they might talk about how Will might need to head along to a special English class or maths class. So it's about getting myself ready to talk about how he needs to be part of the regular maths and English lessons, and we need to find ways to support him so that he can be part of that, whether that be through the concrete materials that he might be using, whether that be through his peers and their interactions with him, and from time to time it might be a teacher aid support there for him. So getting those scripts ready is important. And if you're looking for some tips on that, on our resources page, I think in the advocacy section, there's an excellent little link to some predecessors to the Queensland Collective. They created what we call a propaganda sheet, and it has some of those common barriers that people might present to you and some responses. So that's a good place to look for them as well. We might try and include that link in our follow-up email. And very important too for you, if you haven't already, to try and connect with some peer support so that you get to hear some positive stories, and knowing inclusion is possible will help you be a stronger advocate. This has been so important for me. So the way I first entered into this world of inclusion was for a friend who was connected with the Queensland Collective, and I started attending some of their sessions and hearing from parents of children who were very much like my Will, who had complex issues, and hearing about how they had navigated it, what strategies they had used, and to hear that it was very possible for my son to be included at the local regular school. And we'll talk at the end of the presentation about how to connect with peer support in your area. Okay, so to sum it up, there's probably lots of things swimming around your head. And I know Lydia and I were saying today just how tired we are and how many things is going on at this time of the year, and all that parent admin you got to do just to sort of get out the door in the morning. So yeah, hopefully these summary tips will tie things together for you. So I think we've made it really clear that you've got to keep to that vision. If you don't have a vision yet, this is a project for the holidays. Head along to our website. You can ring us up for a consultation, have a chat about how you can get that vision happening. It might be a good time too to revisit your child's vision. Of course, as Lindy said, each year there's little updates and changes that you'll need to make, leading with their gifts and not those problems. Be careful about what you ask for. So for some parents at this time of the year, they'll be starting to think about what sort of adjustments will my child need to be included in the regular classroom. So we often hear here at Crew how we might have a call saying, oh, how do I request my child to have a full-time aide? And we often ask parents to have a look at that and think about whether that is the best way forward for their child, to have somebody by their side all the time, because that automatically really does separate your child from the rest of the class. It's about having that aide there to be able to foster independence and to gradually step away so that your child is able to interact more easily with the peers, and for the peers to build up that support. So it's a good time too over the holidays to have a look at Crew's information. I think we've got more than anywhere in the world on our resources page, where you can find out all about what inclusive education is and what it looks like and how it should feel for our children. Making inclusion work in the class or finding resources is not your responsibility. Yes, it's a good idea to know the advocacy skills, to have a good understanding of the policies and laws that promote your child's inclusion, but you don't need to be an expert in universal design for learning or differentiation. It's good to know some of those ideas, but really it is up to school to put those practices in place. So don't feel as though you just say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know all of this and I can't give you all the strategies. It's okay for you to realise that that really is school's responsibility, and say, I've got the confidence that you can work this out and find out more for my child and how to include them. Share your knowledge of your child in a warm and non-confrontational way. We often talk about being assertive, not being apologetic, and not being argumentative, but heading along that assertive. And that's fine for you to be assertive and to keep the conversation on the topic of your child and on how they're going to reduce the barriers for them. You have a natural authority over your child, because the decisions that are made this year and the years ahead are going to affect you and your child's life for many years outside school. So it's perfectly fine for you to step up and be that advocate for your child. Okay, So time for some individual reflection, and this might be something that you do in the weeks to come. And as I mentioned in the chat before, you'll be getting a PDF of these slides. So you don't need to do this individual reflection right now. It might be something that you do over the weeks and you'll get a copy of these questions. So what is one unhelpful habit I would like to give up? Maybe that might be apologising for your child. I know that that's very common amongst us all. There might be being too quiet about certain things. What is one helpful habit you'd like to continue and build upon? So we're going to make sure we find those positives within ourselves too. What is one tricky conversation I'd like to rehearse? Sometimes it's good if you've got an ally, somebody that has their head around where you want to go with your child, to have that conversation with them and have a little rehearse about what you might say. And if you haven't got that person, that peer support is a place where you might be able to find that person. What is one thing in my communication that I would like to improve, whether that's in the written form or spoken? And what is one thing I can do to keep learning and developing my skills? I think you're doing it right now by being here and part of this workshop, and heading along to the peer support or to our crew resources page over the holidays will help you out as well. So yes, Ainsley and Linda's tip is take time to reflect and plan over the break, so you can get that 2021 off to a good start. Okay. So before we have some question time, I just want to make sure that you're up to date with the Queensland Collective's work. If you're not familiar with the Queensland Collective, they're a peer support network. They are families all around Queensland that meet once or twice a term in certain areas. And yeah, it might be a coffee morning or it might be a dinner session. There are also some online sessions that are happening as well, something that got going during the COVID time. So there'll always be someone there that has good knowledge around inclusive education and able to answer questions or point people to resources. It's a good chance to sort of talk about what's happening locally, get some tips and have some people as a sounding board as well. So you can see the Queensland map there with all the events that have been happening this term, and Lindy's has created a little one with the ones that are still yet to happen in November for those parents who might want to get along to one of those events. And I do believe there's more online events for people that might be further out and not able to get to those. There's another couple of those happening in December. So you can have a look on Facebook where you'll find the public page and also the closed group as well. That's where people can swap ideas and have questions answered as well. So that brings us to question and answer time.
Yes, good.
Okay, I think we're getting up to 20 to 9.
Yeah.
So we're going to let you head off and make your school lunches and do your ironing or whatever you've got to do.
Yes.
And then hopefully get to bed by 10 o'clock tonight. So thank you so much for coming. We really do appreciate the time and effort and your lucky kids for having you there trying to learn and make this all happen for them. So there's our closing slide. Any last comments, Lindy?
No, I would just really encourage people to go and check that. Our resource site, if you go to crew.org.au, in resources, you'll see inclusive education, and the things we've put in there are really just sort of the best stuff that we could possibly put in there. And there's videos, articles, books, guides, fact sheets. Yeah.
National, international.
So I'd really encourage, and we've tried to sort of break it into sections that are nice and easily accessible for families. So please go and, find whatever. We hope that everything you're looking for is there. And if it isn't, then please contact us and see, and we will see if we can find what you're looking for.
Yeah. And please make sure you take a rest.
Yes.
Hopefully after our talk, you're not thinking, I've got so much to plan for next year. Have a rest. And then have a think about it
Yeah.
after Christmas if you need to. Do a little bit of planning now, put it down, have a break, and then come back to it in the new year.
Yeah, remember it's always important to also be a family, to just be mum and dad, for them to be kids, siblings, and just really enjoy a lovely Christmas break. Very important.
So we wish you all well for the last few weeks of school, and a healthy, happy Christmas, and yeah, a good start to the new year. And remember, we're only a phone call away.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.